Hi everyone, I'm Serena Suman and I am a psychologist and expert training leader in the DIR model. I work in Italy. The town is Crescentino and my clinic is Liberamente. And I work with other person, a psychologist and a speech therapist and so on. And we work with autistic kiddo, ADHD, mental limit, so the neurodevelopmental difficulty. And I'm here because I want to ask to Kim some questions about the movement and the importance of the movement for the development of the children and children that has this kind of difficulty. Ciao a tutti, sono Serena Suman, sono una psicologa e una expert training leader del modello DIR. Sono qua questa sera per fare a Kim delle domande. Io lavoro a Crescentino in Italia. Il mio studio si chiama Liberamente e nel mio studio lavorano diverse altre figure professionali come psicologi, psicoterapisti, logopedisti. Questa sera sono qua appunto per fare delle domande a Kim, in particolar modo sull'importanza del movimento. L'importanza del movimento però nei nostri bambini. Io lavoro prevalentemente con bambini nello spettro autistico, ADHD, disturbi mentali, comunque tutto quello che riguarda la difficoltà del neurosviluppo. E quindi questa sera sono qua per fare le domande a Kim su quanto sia importante il movimento nel nostro lavoro e con i nostri bambini. Kim, thank you very much. I have some questions for you. And all my questions are about the movement because we work with the kiddo and our kiddo has autism or ADHD, so neurodevelopmental difficulty, and all of our kiddo have a great difficulty in the movement. So I love to asking you something about the importance of movement for our kiddo and why our kiddo show this kind of difficulty.
Wow. Ciao, Serena.
Ciao, Kim.
It's so nice to be with you, and I am very grateful for this conversation. Your question about why is movement part of the picture in so many developmental disabilities and differences. And this has a lot to do with the brain and the way that differently wired brains unfold in the diagnosis that is presented, that the movement, the brain parts involved almost always include the movement system. And what that means is how the person holds themselves up against gravity. And we call that postural control. How they move themselves from place to place, which is the dynamic movement system. How do I crawl? How do I walk? How do I get on and off that swing? How do I pick up my pencil? These are neurological pathways that are often interfered with by different wiring in a developmental disability. Additionally, many of our kids, I love how you call them kiddos, many of our kiddos, they have difficulty with planning movements, connecting what they're thinking to performing and getting muscles to do something. That along that highway in the brain, the thoughts, as they get translated into action, is often a challenge for so many of our kiddos. One more in response to your question is emotion. So many children with neurodiversity have difficulties with what we call self-regulation, the ability to manage their states of arousal. They often have so many stressors. They struggle with sensation. They struggle with relationships. They struggle with their emotions. And this is connected to movement. It makes it hard to learn to move, and it interferes with the action, the way that muscles work together under these conditions. So it's a big picture. When you look at a person, movement is affected by lots of different pieces. How is that for an answer?
Fantastic. And I have another question for you, because when we work in particular with autistic children, we see a lot of difficulty in the movement. And I want to ask you in particular, what do we see about the movement? So when I was a therapist, I can see a very part of disconnection in the movement.
Mhm.
And if we want to create a checklist
Okay.
about the majority of difficulty that a therapist can see, what are these difficulties?
Brilliant question. What's so interesting about your question is we are getting set to share our series called Neurodevelopmental Treatment for Children with Autism Spectrum Disorder. And this question is what the workshop is all about. And we now know, Serena, that one of the first features that helps discern or diagnose that this child might have autism shows up in infancy in the movement system. That there are so many signs in how the child moves that might be predictive that there would be a future of autism. And so I'll tell you what those checklist items are. So number one of the most common features is what we call low tone. And for a parent, this looks like floppiness. The child has trouble holding themselves up. They may struggle in pushing against the floor to get their body up into being on their hands and knees, to coming up to sit. They might have trouble getting up to stand. They might not move so much. You might see the child sit in a position where their legs are wide apart and they kind of slump down and their head tilts forward and their shoulders are up. They're just struggling just to stay in an upright position. And this is what we call a red flag, something to be curious about. Number two on the checklist is what we would call asymmetry, where there is a difference between the two sides of the body. And this is a very common feature in children who will later be diagnosed with autism or who are already diagnosed with autism, where you'll see patterns in the body of compensations, where you'll get one arm, one leg that looks like it needs to work harder just to try and keep the body still so that the other side can do its job. And this is very obvious even in early infancy, where you'll get these challenges in bringing the hands together, keeping the head in the middle, and bringing the legs up against gravity like babies do so they can play with their feet. These would be another red flag. I have two more that come to mind right away. Orienting. This is a fancy word that means how I move my body in relationship to what I see in the world. If you call my name, I'm going to orient this is called my trunk. It's going to kind of lean forward. My head might turn in your direction. I might lean my ear because you called my name, or I might actually move my eyes in that direction. These are movements that help us connect to an object or connect to people. And we see in children on the spectrum where their bodies don't respond in this way. They may demonstrate odd orienting responses, leaning away from an object, using their eyes to the side, not turning their head or their body in the direction of the toy, reaching out without looking. These would be additional concerns that may capture the attention of the caregiver as they interact with their child. The fourth one is what often gets diagnosed or called a stereotypical movement, a repetitive action where the child will do something over and over again, and it looks like it doesn't have any purpose. So you might see movements of the head, you might see movements of the arms, you might see movements through the body, you might see the child spin if they're up on their feet. These are movements, and these movements have a purpose. They give the brain greater degrees of information about what that body feels like. When your brain is differently wired, sensations are very difficult to process. And all of us use our body as the place to feel safe, to be regulated and grounded, and to be connected to others. And if I don't have that in my body, it becomes a priority for me. So that was a lot, but those are the key variables for children who are on the spectrum that allows them to be identified early, but also are actually related to the movement system.
Yes. And I think that this is a great point because we underline the importance of movement in the therapy
Yes.
for the child. Yes, of course. And the other question is how the vestibular system is linked with the toe.
Beautiful question. And I think if I were a parent watching or listening, and I saw that my child was not talking, for example, or not connecting or relating, for example, I might get focused on that and not understand, well, what's this movement piece got to do with that? And everything is so connected. And it comes back to how the brain is wired. And when I think about your question about the vestibular system, that's the meeting point. Inside of your inner ear here, it's right in here, is this little tiny structure that has hoops in different directions and registers, am I moving or is the world moving? Am I upside down or am I right side up? And where am I in space? And we take this information for granted unless it's not working. And then we can't think about anything else. Our vestibular system is the foundation of all of our senses. And the vestibular system, the information about space, affects our entire brain. There isn't one part of your brain that doesn't rely on this information. Without accurate registration of this data, your body doesn't know what to do. And the reason why this system is so vulnerable is that it's fully developed in utero. So when you're a fetus developing in mom's tummy, the vestibular system is done by birth. And most differently wired brains are unfolding in utero. And that's why it is so common to have a vestibular related challenge in autism and other disabilities as well. So if I don't get this data, the muscles rely on this data to say, you should contract now, you should fire right now so that you don't fall on your face. And so all of our muscles, starting right from our feet, if we're standing, from our hips, if we're sitting, they come online to keep us upright and to stop us from falling over. But if I don't register that data, I'm not going to have those skills. And I may either not move at all or constantly move all the time so that I register at least a little bit of the information. And we often think, oh, that child is so busy or hyper. We might say those things and identify it as a behavior rather than as a need to try and manage, how am I going to get my muscles to work for me? So that's such a brilliant question you asked.
And when I think about the kiddo, in particular, the autistic kiddo, we see a great difficulty in the relation.
Yes.
But I think that relation is the foundation for the movement. So how we can explain this frame? Relation is the foundation for the movement.
I am smiling from ear to ear because that is such a Serena question that almost no one else would ask. And given your specialty and love of relationship and relationship-based interventions, I am honored because you made that connection. And when you think about a baby, babies, infants don't communicate with language. They communicate with movements. They communicate with nonverbal communication, which is movement. Movement of the facial muscles, movement of the hands, movement of the trunk, movement of their feet. That all of these back and forth interactions that go on between a parent and a child rely on the caregiver's capacity to interpret those movements. And if the baby can't make those movements or responds differently in relationship to the cues they get from their caregiver, it takes the relationship out of sync, creates an interruption in the dance that goes on between the child and the parent. So if the child, for example, doesn't orient, the parent may feel so disappointed, so sad. So where's my child in here? And this is deeply affecting for a parent. And if the parent, which I know this is the whole gift that you have, Serena, is to help the parent understand and translate what they see. If the parent gets a new set of glasses to put on in how they view their child, they can learn how to connect and build on that connection and develop the movements and build on the connection day by day by day to strengthen this relational capacity that is just sitting there waiting to evolve.
And I think with this your beautiful observation, we have put together all the pieces. Because when we see a kiddo, we have to understand the movement, the posture, all the difficulty, all what he can do. And we have to prioritize the therapy. And in the end, but not because it's not important, we have to remember the relation, because all the things happens in the relation. So
beautiful.
Thank you so much, because your words are so fantastic and so profound and so true.
Grazie.
Grazie
to you and to your team, and thank you for today's conversation.
Thank you so much, Kim.